Welcome. This is David Boles, Human Meme. Today's topic, I prefer not to.
Ah, Bartleby. Ah, humanity.
And with those final words, the 1853 Herman Melville short story, Bartleby the Scrivener, A Story of Wall Street, ends. In the Bartleby story, we meet a scrivener, a copyist, who ends up working and dying in the dead letter office, where all the wishes of the world go unanswered and find a grave in the dying flames of humanity. And yes, our Bartleby is a harbinger reminder for us that everything dissolves and then reconstitutes in unforetold ways that are always perilous to heart, mind, and being. The idea of Bartleby is for us to wonder about the point of our existence. How do we work and live and love? What do we choose to allow to define us? What makes our end ours alone and nobody else's? Are we predestined to become mechanical, and then virtual, and then viral? Or do we have some sort of free will say in how our lives will unfold and crease? Perhaps the most famous line from the short story and the notion is the idea of Bartleby in the phrase, I prefer not to. I prefer not to, as spoken by Bartleby when he did not want to do something asked of him by his employer. I prefer not to became my rallying cry as a youngster growing up in the middling Midwest. And what kid doesn't want to say to an adult when asked to do something unwanted and unsavory? I prefer not to. How does one react to being told, I prefer not to? Do you react with rage, empathy, a shared preferring? Is there then now a similar consequential understanding that the entire purpose of life is doing things you'd prefer not to? Yes, I prefer not to is the perfect ancient transcription of I'm standing up in my mind while you tell me to sit down. And we, the irreverent and the unredeemable, do not have to ask for permission or forgiveness to utter that phrase, because the great writer Herman Melville gifted it to everyone. Plus, the infamous I prefer not to is just too polite for an angry reply. Even in the coldest Midwest, where children are furniture to be sat upon, and children are machines of predestiny that are spat upon, casting a wetted wish against the skin. Who knew Melville's Bartleby would become the poster child for modern-day passive-aggressiveness? And passive-aggressiveness, in case you don't know, is a psychological term first spun in 1945. From Webster's. Passive-aggressiveness, being marked by or displaying behavioral characters by expression of negative feelings, resentment, and aggression in an unassertive, passive way, as through procrastination, stubbornness, and uncommunicativeness. In other words, you're asked, when are you going to wash the dishes? And you say, when I get around to it. Or, more simply, when asked if you'll get the budget done by 5 p.m., you merely smile and shrug your shoulders. Passive-aggressiveness is the grandfather of the microaggression and the niece of open hostility. And together, they reform our beloved Bartleby. And yes, passive-aggressiveness is transgender, non-gender, and mainly, purely male. So is Bartleby and his story about not wanting to do anything, and then working in the dead letter office, the definition of the heights of a nihilistic life. We always begin at the end of us, and yet we sit here, staring into the abyss, totally unaware of what we're seeing, and not yet understanding. Is it ever a mistake to prefer not to do something? Must we always be busy and apoplectic? Where do we go to find the quiet moments in life when nothing is asked of us, and we are left to the futility of living, and of burning undeliverable letters born of wants and ending in wishes? Bartleby is a master scrivener for the rest of us, a mannequin upon which we drape our clothing, a carved face in a totem pole. Bartleby is the ubiquitous us of us, and we search the madding crowd for someone, anyone, who looks and thinks as do we. When will we learn a life is not earned? A life is protected. A life is put together. A life is constructed of inanimate things that can only hope to live beyond our means. And yet, in Bartleby, in this Bartleby as human cipher, we are left empty and wanton, because there is no there when it comes to befriending or imitating Bartleby. We have enough of our own disappointments and depressions, and that's Melville's point about his Bartleby. There are ghosts of people who move among us, dealing with deadly and terrible things that go unspoken, but lived. And we don't want to know about them until it's too late to do anything about them, and they are dead and cold in the ground. To befriend a Bartleby in life is never done, because nobody wants to hold hands with a jinx. Of what is life, if not in wondering and exploration? For the Bartlebys among us, they are not interested in thriving or of being interesting. They merely want the same stasis on their way to Calvary, with no pauses or visible disfigurements. They only have hidden reckonings that can only be resolved in the edification of the Spirit, in the hands of a master writer, and the sharpened point of a quill pen.
The report was this: that Bartleby had been a subordinate clerk in the dead letter office at Washington, from which he had been suddenly removed by a change in the administration. When I think over this rumor, I cannot adequately express the emotions which seize me. Dead letters! Does it not sound like dead men? Conceive a man by nature and misfortune prone to a pallid hopelessness. Can any business seem more fitted to heighten it than that of continually handling these dead letters and assorting them for the flames? For by the cartload they are annually burned. Sometimes from out the folded paper the pale clerk takes a ring. The finger it was meant for, perhaps, moulders in the grave. A banknote sent in swiftest charity. He whom it would relieve nor eats nor hungers any more. Pardon for those who died despairing, hope for those who died unhoping, good tidings for those who died stifled by unrelieved calamities. On errands of life these letters speed to death. Ah, Bartleby! Ah, humanity!
Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.